So, welcome everyone. Thank you for attending. My name is Scott Reeves. This is Frederick Crozat. We are both employed at SUSE. I am the SUSE Linux Enterprise Desktop Development Manager. Frederick Crozat is our SUSE Linux Enterprise Desktop Release Manager. And what we'll be demoing today is remote graphical access. Methods, protocols, configuration options, debugging techniques, optimizations across the board. So let's just dive right in here. What we're going to do is we'll do this a little bit differently. What we're going to do is we're going to kind of do a two-pass over the data. We're going to go first over it and give you a high-level overview of the various server connections that are available, XRDP, VNC, all these type of different server protocols that are available. Also, all the clients that are available to connect to them. Some of the caveats, the pros and cons, how you enable them, security implications, but all this we'll do is just a high-level verbal overview. Then we'll go back and we'll go through and we'll do a demo of everything that we just discussed. Right, so we have several VMs set up. We have a SLES VM set up, a SLED VM, a Windows machine. We have all these set up, and we'll show you connecting and enabling and all that kind of stuff. So if at any time during the first part of the presentation you have a question, feel free to ask it. But don't panic if I'm going over multiple things and you're, oh, wait, how? Because in the demo, we will explicitly show you, click here. Do this. This is what this config file looks like, that kind of stuff, right? So it'll be a two-pass through the various options. The first two sections are about full desktop connectivity, right? When you want to log in and have a complete session running and you want to have this remote. We'll then cover a few other remote access methods that are for more limited use cases. This will be your typical SSH-Y or -X session where you're just trying to remote access one particular application, not an entire desktop session, a few other things like that. We'll cover then some session monitoring and management. When you use these things, you'll frequently see you'll get in a case where a remote client hangs, or you don't know who's logged into my box right now. How many people are on this? One of them's gone south. How do I kill this guy? How do I see what seats are active? How do I switch an active seat? That kind of stuff. Right, so we'll go into this in the monitoring and management, as well as, of course, where do you go look for debug logs? How do you turn on extra debugging switches? That kind of stuff, right? So that's the flow. So first, we'll start out on the server side of the world, then we'll move into the client. So on the server side, we'll start out with the old tried and true X Display Manager control part protocol access, right? It's been around forever, works. It's pretty simple. You enable it in in either in YAST or in the etc sysconfig display manager file if you're on the command line. However, there are better options nowadays. There are much better options. So this usage is discouraged by SUSE. We would recommend that you move on to some of the newer ones. One, obviously, Xdmcp suffers from any of the inherent security limitations that X does, right? It's clear text. It talks right directly to the wire. You have snooping issues. If anybody has access to the XOF file, they can override and snoop, right? All this kind of stuff, right? It suffers from that. But an even more pertinent issue in my mind, because you can try to play around this with a VPN or that kind of stuff, right? But even more important is the second issue is modern desktop systems are like, for example, the GNOME desktop in SLE 12, right? It's a composited desktop. It does a lot of drop shadows, and as you're moving your window, it redraws the entire window so it's smooth. You'll have animations as you click and enable the menus. All this kind of stuff over Xdmcp, every single bit gets sent over as it's damaged and sent, right? So it's going to be very, very slow trying to access this nice new composited desktop. The other methods that we've discussed try to do some intelligent caching and sending the primitives and compression and that kind of stuff that does a lot better. So Xdmcp is still available, right? You can still use it, but it's obviously limited for, I'd say, more of a test environment and a local LAN where you're not so worried about security and those kind of things.
Or if you have legacy applications that you know are not requiring best of breed desktop. Sometimes it happens, we have customers like that, so that's why we are still shipping it.
Yes, yeah. So there are scenarios where you use it, but a better option, which is what we would recommend, is VNC. Right? This is the recommended option. The security is built in. Right? We'll go through and we'll show you this. We TLS underneath enabled on all of the options, as well as it tries to do some caching, some compression. There are some of these options that try to do a little bit better primitive management rather than sending all these bits and blitz. So you will get better performance and better security out of the box. Now there are several ways that you can configure a VNC session on the various ways. There's the two that I'll cover here are you can either go through YAST, right? And then YAST, you pull up YAST, you go into the remote administration. What this does is it enables an XVNC session that's listening for incoming connections. The details under the covers, right? It goes through your XINetD, so it doesn't actually fire up the server until an incoming connection comes in on XINetD. That then spawns the XVNC server and makes it available. By default, an XVNC session that you configure through YAST is an independent session. And I'll cover what exactly that means versus a sharing session. But what it means is this: if you connect to this session, the lifetime, the scope of that session is managed by the viewer, by the client, right? If you connect on a client to this session and then your client crashes or it goes away, the session's gone, right? In several of the keynotes and in several of the remote other sessions, I've heard the references to pets versus cattle, right? And I felt kind of left out, but I can stretch that analogy right here and say, these sessions would be your cattle sessions, right? They go away. The second one, this is your session that stays and it stays around and you don't want it to go away. So the other way is through the GNOME Control Center. So right from the desktop, pull up the GNOME Control Center and go into the sharing panel. In that sharing panel, you'll see several options. There's options to share files and Bluetooth connections and all that other. One of them is called screen sharing. In that screen sharing thing, this will enable a persistent session. What it is, it's the session that you're logged in at the host at, right? So it doesn't create a new session. Well, what it does is it attaches a VNC server to your existing session. So it's available. So when you log in remotely, what you're doing, you're not creating a new session, you're not doing anything, you are attaching to the current running session that you're logged into. So what this does is as that goes away, it doesn't matter. You can also have multiple remote connections to that same thing because you're just sharing an existing session. So some of the security implications of this, right? With the XVNC method, you will want to enable a strong password at the VNC protocol layer level. Or no, you don't need to enable a strong password at the VNC protocol layer level because your connection goes in there, but the first thing you see is your display manager, right? And so that's managing access into your box. So when you connect, you can just connect directly to the machine, and then your display manager will manage, okay, select a user, authenticate, and then you get in, right? Versus the Vino one, that's going straight into your running session. So you'll want to establish a strong password at that level at the VNC connection protocol layer so that you don't get anybody being able to remotely access your session if they happen to know your IP address and port. So
one thing to add on top of that is that with Vino, you can also require to authorize manually the session. Let's take an example, service desk. You have a problem on your system, you call service desk and they tell you, I want to remotely access your system. So in that case, you can enable the screen sharing from Vino, and instead of putting a password, you will authorize, basically ask me to authorize somebody is trying to connect on my system. And in that case, you get a nice pop-up, and then you just click authorize, and then service desk is able to basically take over your computer. You can see what they are doing, but they can take over, and very easily you don't have to set up a password. But this is one use case. The other use case, which is mostly used, is the one Scott described.
Yeah, and you'll see this during the demo, the different options. When you go to enable this, there are very simple checkboxes. Allow remote access, password, prompt on the local box when a connection comes in before allowing it, right? So you can monitor and say, no, not right now, I don't want anybody connecting, those type of stuff. All right, another thing that is supported out of the box is RDP sessions. This is mostly for connecting to a Windows client or from a Windows client, but it can be done either direction, right? We're talking the Microsoft protocol, the RDP is available on a Windows box, either as a client or a server, and also on our SLE boxes as a client or a server. So you can connect from a Windows machine to your SLE server, or you can connect from a SLED box or a SLE box to a Windows machine, right? We provide both ways through freerdp or Xrdp. So keep in mind though, what that means is on your client session on your server, it's built on top of XVNC. And we'll show this explicitly in the demo, but what it means is that when you connect in from your Windows box over RDP, it then talks to that XVNC session that you set up beforehand. So you can either come in and talk. One thing I probably ought to point out on this, I meant to point out on this previous one, is you can change this independent session. If you go into the configuration file, which is stored in etc, xinetd, VNC, you can go in there and tweak it to be a session that has a lifetime that sticks around. Right? By default, it's this independent session, but you can go in there and change via the wait parameter, change that to a yes from a no, and we can show you this. And then that session will stick around, and in our VMs, we have it set up both ways, and we'll show you connecting to one. As soon as we disconnect, it's gone. We'll show you connecting to it again, disconnect, come in from another box, the session's still there and running, right? So this is all available. All right, so this was all on the server side. This is all pieces that you can use to set up your connection. What about from the client side? There are multiple different methods that you can use. The one that's built into the SLES server, or SLE, either SLES or SLED, that's built into the SLE box right out of that is called Vinagre. And it has the capabilities to connect either via SSH, RDP, VNC, Spice, that's all built in and available right from the thing. The nice thing about Vinagre is it's integrated really well with the desktop. So if, for example, you go in and you want to connect to several different servers, right? VNC servers or RDP servers, it doesn't matter, whatever. When you go to connect, when you need to enter your password, it will automatically store that in the GNOME keyring, right? So it'll supply that at connection time, so you don't need to supply it again. Now, just for those who aren't familiar, the GNOME keyring is a encrypted storage. It's an encrypted password storage that runs on your desktop. So when you type that password in, or when you log into your box, that keyring is automatically unlocked and is listening in the background for requests to it. So when the Vinagre client connects to a Windows RDP session and it says enter the password, it'll intercept that, supply that password, and you're good, right? The Vinagre client is also quite nice in that it has some smarts built into it that it'll attempt to snoop on the local network for servers that are running of the type that you're trying to connect to, right? And so you'll see this when we pull up the Vinagre client. You can either manually type in the location you want to go, or you can just look for existing servers that are out there talking and then just select them from the box and connect up. So it has some pretty nice features. You can also, it's a tabbed interface, so you can maintain multiple connections at the same time and switch between those. And you can also switch to a full screen mode when you go to the one you want. And it has a nice little interface integrated with the GNOME desktop that you can just move your mouse up to the center and it'll pop up this little box that can switch between your things, exit out of full screen mode. So it has the really nice integration with the desktop. But there's, of course, the VNC viewer, the standard Tiger VNC supplied guy, right? It's more of a command line interface that you can go, but you connect over that one. That's available. There's also the option that you don't even need a FAT client at all on your box. You can connect directly to all these from any web browser that has Java-enabled support. As part of the XVNC package, we ship a set of a Java applet that when you enable this XVNC server, it sets up a minimal HTTP server listening on by default port 5800, but it's listening there. And so when you go into a browser and hit that port, it will download that Java applet into your browser and then connect to that VNC session. So you can access this directly from a browser without any FAT client support. And like I said, the security is all built in out of the box by default. It's all enabled over TLS. It's set up nice there. So now we will go into the demo part and show all of these pieces and how they work together.
Thank you, Scott. So let's switch to our VMs. So right now I have 3 VMs running. So sorry, part of the interface, the main interface is in French, but don't worry, the rest will be in English. Or if you really want, I can do everything in French, but I don't think I am, apart from a few people in the audience, I would lose probably everybody. So right now we have 3 VMs running on my laptop, one which is a Windows 7 VMs, a SLES 12 SP2 and a SLED 12 SP2. So let's start with RDP, because Scott mentioned it.
Xdmcp?
No, RDP. Let's do it first from a cross OS perspective, and then we'll stick just to Linux. So let me switch to the Windows one. Yeah, I know. I prepared the Windows VM more than a month ago, and I didn't have time to find a serial number. So now Windows is complaining that I didn't put a serial number. So don't worry. Anyway, so right now I'm running under Windows, and I can very easily connect over RDP to my SLES box. So I already pre-entered the IP address, and there I'm connected on the SLES box. From there I can, sorry, I can okay, if I use the right tux, so right username will be better. Yeah, there I'm connected. So just like Scott explained, I'm connected using RDP from the Windows system to the SLES system, and then internally the RDP gateway is talking to the XVNC server inside the SLES system. And from there I have a running session where I can administrate my SLES system. Remember that RDP client on Windows is provided by default. You don't have to install anything from anybody else. You don't have to pay for it. It's bundled with Windows. Very nice way to handle, to manage a SLES system graphically if you are from a Windows system. So let's, and as you can see, I can do basically whatever I want. One thing that we do, Scott mentioned that with GNOME 3, we are doing a very nice desktop with a lot of shadows and animation, but to try to reduce network usage, GNOME is smart enough to detect that it's running in a network connection, so that there is less shadows, less animation, so that it uses less network bandwidth. So let me log out from there, and I'm back on Windows. So let's try to do the reverse, meaning I'm on a SLE system and I want to connect on a Windows system. So from there, I'm switching to my sled box.
Yeah, and just one thing to notice, like I said, we have a SLES. If you pull up the list of the VMs available, we have a SLES VM that's running. We have a SLED VM and the Win7 box. And so the SLES machine is just running in the background so that we can show connecting to it, and then we'll demonstrate the connections on the SLED and
Windows,
the Win7 machine.
The Windows VM, the SLED VM, the SLES VM. So let's go full screen. Full screen, as Scott mentioned, this is something you can do with VM, but you can also do with Vinagre on any remote system. You can basically go full screen on any system you want to connect. So there, I'm going to connect with Vinagre on the Windows system. I can either do that manually, so I choose RDP, I enter the name of either the host name or the IP address, or, which is very handy, I can also have bookmarks, which is very nice. So there I have my Windows 7 system, and there it prompts me for the password, username and password to be used. One new feature from Service Pack 2 is that we are supporting what is called NLA on the RDP protocol, which is the network layer interface or network layer authentication. This is something which is bundled in the RDP protocol for some time now. In the past, there was no authentication done in the RDP protocol, meaning that to connect on a Windows system, you were connecting first in graphical environment on the Windows system, and from there, you were authenticating yourself graphically, which means that potentially somebody could, over the wire, check what was happening, and authentication was done after the session was established. Now with NLA, which is by default in recent Windows, the authentication is done when the connection is created. So that's why I'm getting a pop-up which is in Vinagre and not in a Windows environment that you would expect if you were connecting on a Windows system. So I'm just going to type the password, and one nice thing that I didn't check on purpose here, as Scott mentioned, if you want, you can save the credential for this Windows system in the GNOME keyring, so that next time you log in, you don't have to prompt again the password. This is optional, you don't have to use it. And as Scott already mentioned, the GNOME keyring is encrypted and is by default automatically unlocked when you log in, because it's encrypted with your Linux login password. Again, this can be modified if you want. Oops. Again, if I use the right password, should be better. Yeah. Yeah.
The username is passed, right? The username is also passed.
I'm not 100% sure. No, it's not Tux. I know. It's because I'm logged in Windows. Let's log out. Yeah, sometimes Windows is a bit tricky. See? Yes, I know. Don't say that to my boss, he's in the room. So there we are. From a SLE system, you can very easily authenticate and remotely manage a Windows system. Yes, I know. So very nice things to do. Another thing we can do, so I'm switching to the Windows VM. So here, if we are a bit crazy, no, let's stick to the plan. One thing we can do, Scott mentioned it, you can connect on a VNC system with a regular web browser using Java. So on my /12 system, I have a VNC running, configured, and I'm on Windows. Let's imagine I don't have the RDP configured on my / system, so my only way to connect is using a web browser. So I will use, and I'm very crazy because I'm using Internet Explorer, which these days is a bit old. So it's complaining because I'm using IP address and I didn't generate, and my VM is very old. Just a matter of certificates, yes. It's very secure, as you can see. But it's going to happen, yes. So here I'm connected in Internet Explorer. Of course, it would work with Firefox, with Chrome, through Java on my / box, where I can log in graphically, and I'm going to be able to manage my desktop, which is pretty nice.
Can I go full screen?
Yes. Here it's going to be a bit tricky because my laptop and the projector. Okay, let's try.
I just wonder if we can.
Yeah, we can go full screen, but again, we are VMs inside remote desktop, so plus a projector, plus a small laptop. It's a bit crowded here. But yes, it's possible. Otherwise, as you can see, we have a scroll bar, which is nice. Anyway, so here we basically demonstrated what we can do from a Windows box in both directions. So let's switch to Linux box. Okay, so I have demonstrated you quite quickly Vinagre to be able to connect over RDP. One thing Scott mentioned, Xdmcp. So the old X11, some people would say legacy protocol, but we are still using that. Everybody's using that. We can connect on the / system over Xdmcp. So here, this is the name of the system, /12 sp2 VNC, and I can log in again. Sorry, because here I have the / system, and outside you can see the / system. Performance is not bad, but you can see that there is already some kind of latency when I move mouse, and I'm on a local, I'm inside 2 VMs, so there is latency between 2 VMs on the single system. You can imagine over the wires, it's awful. And there are also, as we mentioned, problem with encryption, which is not present at all. So it would, if you really have to use that, you really need to ensure that your network is secure and nobody can basically plug something on the network and sniff everything that go on the wire. But it's one possibility with Xdmcp. Just
right-click on that Xdmcp connection and just show them what it's running.
So yeah. So basically, what we do is we start another X server, which is called Xephyr, and we tell it to query over the wires to the /12 sp2 VNC host name, and with a screen size very specific. Okay, then I demoed connecting over VNC from Windows on a web browser. I have exactly the same one with Firefox on Linux. I guess we can skip that. It's going to be the same. More important, let's connect with Vinagre on the SLES system. Okay, so one nice thing is here I'm able to put some constraint on how the rendering is done. So since I have not a big screen, first let me go full screen so that we have more. I can have scaling or not, which is very nice if I have a very small resolution. Okay, there you can see anything, me neither, but it can be very useful. So let me connect. And there I have my session where I can do anything I want over VNC. A new feature that we have introduced with Service Pack 2 is that you can configure dynamically the session type. So here we have a session which is by default non-persistent, which means that as soon as I disconnect, or if, for instance, I was over a Wi-Fi network and by mistake or whatever event, the network is shut down, the connection is terminated, which terminates the XVNC session. We can now change the type of this session to a persistent session, which is quite handy, by just going there. And from there, I can choose switching from a non-persistent to a persistent connection. And even better, I can ensure that, because when it's a non-persistent connection, I'm being prompted over GDM, my credential, but on a persistent connection, by default, I'm not being prompted, of course, how anybody can connect on this session, so I can put still a password, a username and password, and allow just one connection or several connections. So let's try that. So I have the connection which is running. Let's open an application. Let's kill the connection. So I'm no longer connected. And let's try to reconnect. Hopefully it will still work. One thing to remember, move a bit the cursor, and there we have the new feature from Service Pack 2. You can choose either to reconnect to the session which is still running or create a new session for another user, for instance. So here, let's try to reconnect. Again, I have to put my credentials. Those are the PAM credentials, so you don't have to handle another set of username and password. And I'm back to my session, and as you see, it's the same session I had opened a terminal. It's still available. But if I try to, here we have a session which allows one client at a time, which means if I try to connect on another tab to the same system, there, tux, nah, not authorized. But if I allow that, let's be crazy, let's do it. No, let's do it from the same system. Connect. Same one. Or I can do it from here. Vinagre. Sorry, it's in French, but you are used to it now. That should have worked. Let's start again. tux. Remote connect. I think my laptop is running LibreOffice plus 3 VMs. Yeah, I have 2 sessions running in parallel. So you could basically use that to do a basic screen sharing. You want to do a teaching between several people or whatever. Can be very useful. What else do we have? Here in the bookmark, by default, you see I have 2. So the 2 bookmarks that I used, the VNC Manager, the / one, and Windows 7. The two one which are below have been automatically detected on the network. Latitude is the name of my laptop because I have Vino running on my laptop, and SLED 12 is because the SLED system has its own sharing, so we can connect on it. What else did we miss? If I remember correctly, screen sharing from Vino.
Show them the VNC config with the shared clipboard.
Let's first ensure that people know how to enable screen sharing inside the GNOME desktop, because it's a bit hidden, so usually people are searching for it. It's in GNOME Control Center, so from over there, you go to sharing, and there you have screen sharing. By default, it's off, obviously. And from there, you can enable screen sharing. New feature from Service Pack 2, you can limit the screen sharing, the current, on your current session on a specific network interface on SLED, meaning that you can disable it on the Wi-Fi and enable it only on the Ethernet port, for instance. Can be useful. And from there you can, as I said, you can choose asking for a prompt to authorize access to it, or instead requiring a password that you set yourself. And when you use this screen sharing feature, it's basically you are remotely connecting on the running session. So it's very handy to have that. For instance, you have a workstation in your desk, on your desk in the office. You have a VPN which is available to be able to connect remotely. So basically you are at home, you need to do something very urgent on your system in your desk. You have a VPN, you connect through the VPN, and from there you can take control of your session and check whatever was needed. Very, very handy. Okay, that's basically it for the demo. Yes?
In case I would use this password access,
yep.
So would I be notified as a, let's say, user behind the computer that somebody accesses the password?
Yes. So what's happening? Let's try to do that. Let's see. So I have enable in SLED. Let's enable that because I had disabled it. Sharing, screen sharing to on. Let's require a password. Tux. Okay. And from there, I'm going to use my Vinagre. Connect to this one. I get a prompt. I type it. And from there, I'm not sure you saw it briefly. We got a pop-up. Another user is using the connection, and even better than that. So if we go back to the SLED VM, I have here basically stating that somebody is connected, and I can disconnect it at any point. So basically, it's not possible to monitor somebody without him knowing that he's being monitored. We are running out of time, so I would stop the demo now and give back to you the slides.
One other thing that's kind of a useful feature is you can have shared clipboards between your the guest and the host, and if you want to see that afterwards, we can demo it with more time. Or it's managed just by running VNC config, and then that enables that, and then you can cut and paste between guests and hosts and that kind of stuff, which is pretty cool.
In the back.
Can you share a little bit about firewall settings? What's default is less installed for each on the Yast takes care of it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Don't do the Yast thing, you're not working on those points.
So for VNC, we have a setting in Yast. So you just select VNC server. It's already predefined. So you just have to choose it, and from there, it's going to punch a hole in the firewall on your system to allow connection on the VNC system.
No.
It doesn't matter. It will be the same. By default, we are not punching the firewall, so you have to do that yourself. Same is true for SSH. By default, it's not open by default.
Yeah, so if you want both of those, you need to, there's a drop down that says available protocols. You need to select both of those, SSH and VNC. And
on the Windows side,
on Windows side, it's by default, Windows doesn't open the RDP server. So if you enable it, it's going to open the RDP on the firewall, because otherwise nothing will work.
go ahead.
Can I use my local devices, printer or something like that, on the remote?
No. No. If you are connecting to a remote system, you can access the system which are available on the remote system, but you cannot try to print something on the printer which is on your desk, because we are connecting to an external system, and you are not bringing the desktop on your system local. So what is possible is, as Scott mentioned, copy paste on the clipboard. With RDP, I think it's possible even to have the sound, but I'm not 100% sure.
You actually can do that if you use thin print. We have one guy that works outside that we use thin print. So you remote into the facility, open up an RDP function, and we tie thin print to this.
Yeah,
printer.
with RDP is possible, not with VNC.
Okay, with that, okay.
Yeah. Okay. So some other methods that do not provide, like I was saying, the full desktop session, but are very handy. Probably you're aware of this. Tunneling X over SSH, right? That eliminates the security problems that you're dealing with. But the thing is, it's only for applications. It does not work well for a full desktop, and you can't attach to a running application. You need to SSH in and then start it so it connects up to your proper display. You can mess around with graphical apps in containers. It does work, but it's not. We don't have it. It's not even a tech preview. We're just working with it. Maybe in future SUSE 13 or something, we'll have that going. One of Frederick's French compadres has got it working, but it's there but not supported.
At the moment it's very, very early, and we don't know if we will put that in an enterprise product or not.
Yeah. A few things just to be aware of that are coming down the pipe in the future to get around these X11 socket issues. Wayland is coming up. We will probably, it's in Tumbleweed. So if you want to go play with a latest version of Tumbleweed, you can look at it, as well as Flatpak. You may have heard of this as called XDmcp. It's a way to download an application that you want, run it in an isolated sandbox there on your own desk. It's just some things that you may want to go out and play with and look around for alternative options that are coming.
But again, not in SLE at the moment.
Yeah.
Might happen in the future. We'll see.
yeah, if you want to play with any of those, it'll be on, it's stuff that we're developing in Tumbleweed and we'll roll into the next version of SLE.
Okay, so very quickly, we talked about accessing a SLE system from Windows. For RDP, we have demoed it, so you see it's available, it's built in. We have customers who might need to access X11 application from Windows, so it's possible. There is several products to do that. One from our mother company, Micro Focus, called Reflection X 2014, and you can also do that with standalone X server. There are even free one, Xming, Xseed, or Cygwin X server. Be careful because a lot, if not all, of the X server available on Windows do not support the latest X extensions, which means that you might not be able to connect to a GNOME 3 desktop, because GNOME 3 or KDE5 requires recent X11 extensions, and most, if not all of the X11 server available on Windows do not support those extensions. It's unfortunate. And for VNC, if you want to connect to a VNC system, either you use Java, as we demoed, or you can use VNC Viewer. It's available on Windows, or you can use also libvirt viewer. It's supposed to be used only to access VMs, but you can also use that to connect to VNC server on Linux. Good point for this one, it supports TLS, so that you can be sure that the connection is secure from both ends. I think we are 2 minutes over time, so I'm very briefly, you do it or I do it, Scott?
Go ahead.
I go ahead. So, as Scott mentioned, sometimes on a system you need to see who is logged on the system, to which seats. We have something which is called LoginD and LoginCTL, which are part of systemd. Those are very handy tools. With LoginCTL, you can basically see who is connected to what on your system. And you can very easily, again, kill the sessions or kill all the sessions from a specific user with one command as root. Or see if a session is active or not. For instance, somebody is logged in on a TTY, but it's not the active TTY. Somebody switched to another TTY. You can see if the session is active or not, and basically kick people off a session. Yeah, that was very fast. Sorry. And yeah, tips for debugging. If you have any issues with GDM, you can enable the debug mode. It's hidden a bit in etc gdm-custom.conf, and then all the logs go in varlog GDM. And one thing which might be useful depending on your use case, sometime GDM might not suit you for your specific use case. As I mentioned, if you have to connect from a X11 server from Windows on a SLE 12 system, GDM will not work because it requires recent X extensions. But we are shipping the old legacy Xdm display manager, so that can be changed. And also, if you do not need a full feature Windows Manager and desktop such as GNOME 3, we are also shipping IceWM as a very light Windows Manager, which can be used for some workload. And yeah, you can use some command line to run Vinagre in debug mode, but let's not spend too much time on it. Questions before everybody is run to the closing keynote?
I have one question.
Yes.
On the Windows side, you were showing when you did the remote desktop, it came up with an came up with something different than I used to when you log into Windows. plug into Linux. That's something new. It didn't give you the remote desktop protocol. It gives you something.
Oh, I see what you mean. Let's run it.
Yeah,
That is a session manager which is shipped with XRDP. You can basically tune it, and it's kind of away from the RDP session when you connect on a SLE system to basically decide what you want to do, because you could use that as a gateway from to jump to another host. So here I have, by default, I'm connecting on XVNC, but I could jump to another port on another VNC server or even another system. This is configurable, and it's called SESMAN, but it's part of the XRDP packages.
That's a part of Windows?
No. This is running on the SLE 12 system.
On the SLE. Oh, that's on SLE.
Yep.
Yeah, you've connected over RDP to our XRDP server, and that's what's sending back that display.
Basically, here I'm already connected on the SLE system.
Yes. And it's the gateway similar to GDM or whatever.
Yeah, it's replacing GDM for RDP.
I just
basically just saying you're using that as a mailbox.
Yeah. That's your entry point to where you can. Yeah, where do you want to go?
Or if you only want to do a specific box, you can administer from that.
Yeah.
And that's on the new one, 12.2.
This is not new. This was already available since SLE 12 SP0. What is new is the VNC manager, which is prompting you: do you want a new connection or plug in on an existing connection? Other question?
Anything else? All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.